Rock Hudson dies of AIDS in his Beverly Hills mansion, leaving behind a shocked public and a distraught lover.
Unlike now, that was pretty much a death sentence if you got HIV.
His death sparks a fierce legal battle and extraordinary revelations.
It wouldn't have made any difference what I had offered. He wasn't there to negotiate.
That was when the big threats came out. So I'm going to go to the world and tell the world that Rock Hudson's a fairy. I'm going to tell the world Rock Hudson's gay.
At stake is a multi-million-dollar payout and the legacy of a matinee idol. July 1985, a frail and exhausted Rock Hudson collapses at the Ritz Hotel in Paris. For a year, this movie star's medical condition has been kept secret. Now, the truth is finally revealed. Rock Hudson has full-blown AIDS, diagnosed in the United States more than a year ago. The news is a terrible shock to his friends, including Susan Stafford, a former hostess on the TV game show Wheel of Fortune. Stafford remembers the scene at Hudson's Beverly Hills home.
There was so much panic. There was so much judgment. It was such a circus up there. It was so, people were so scared.
It sends tremors far beyond Tinseltown. Rock Hudson, a handsome Hollywood leading man, is not what he seems.
There was a huge secret. If he indeed were to tell the truth, his career would take perhaps a plunge.
In 1948, a truck driver and aspiring young actor Roy Fitzgerald is looking for his big break. David Ehrenstein, author and film critic.
He was very tall and he was very good looking, and someone that tall and that good looking would certainly get their foot in the door.
He gets noticed by Henry Wilson, a notorious Hollywood agent.
Now, Wilson was gay and had an eye for hot-looking guys, who he would then convert into stars and give them new names.
Names like Rock Hudson. And despite limited acting experience, Rock's career takes off.
In the early days of his career, I would say that he had the minimum amount of talent. He had a lovely, mellifluous voice. He read the lines, could walk across the screen and not trip over the furniture. Then producer Ross Hunter decided that he was going to remake Magnificent Obsession, and he decided that Rock was going to play the male lead. Suddenly, Rock became a big star.
Hudson would star in almost 70 movies, including the acclaimed melodrama Giant, for which he won an Academy Award nomination.
He was movie star, and he lived and breathed movie star. He was there to be the boyfriend, the dream lover, that the ladies would flock to and look up from the screen and, you know, get all dreamy over.
In Pillow Talk, Hudson discovered an untapped comedic talent.
Suddenly we were going to see Rock Hudson not in some great romantic drama that dragged you in, but in some wonderful, silly comedy. And he and Doris Day were a fantastic team.
He's charming, he's charismatic. He had a twinkle in his eye. He was real.
Like most gay actors at the time, Rock remains firmly in the closet. Coming out would have caused irreparable damage to his career, and his friends stayed loyal and silent.
I would say that the gossip magazines, which were trying desperately to get people to talk about Rock Hudson, friends of his and what have you, but they couldn't get anybody. So there was a sort of vague sense of, gee, when is Rock Hudson going to get married?
In 1955, Rock does get married to his agent secretary, Phyllis Gates. But the part of loving husband is not Rock's greatest role. They divorce after just 3 years.
Finally, both of them decided to call it quits, and that was it. But it served its purpose in the sense that Rock Hudson got to pretend to be a heterosexual in the most official way possible by marrying a woman.
By the 1970s, Rock is a homebody, but what a home it is. He lives in a lavish mansion overlooking Beverly Hills. Rock calls his home the Castle, and it becomes a lively epicenter of social activity. Susan Stafford met Hudson through mutual friends.
Rock always brought the best out of you. And it's a real compliment to him because not a lot of people can do that, especially a star. And you felt like when you arrived at the castle, you could let it rip. It was fun.
Susan attended a memorable 50th birthday party for Rock.
He put on such a show. The finest moment was Rock Hudson coming down the stairs. He had on a huge diaper with huge safety pins. I mean, gigantic safety pins, one on each side, and he had a little hat on and it said 50, and he said, "Happy birthday to me." I mean, it was so cute, and that's how willing he was to make fun of himself and have fun, because he wanted you to have fun.
Martin Flaherty was hired as an assistant gardener and handyman at the age of 17. Marty soon becomes a member of the household and a part of the extended family.
I was never treated as an outsider. I was welcomed in every situation. It was actually a very class act up at that home. Yeah, though it was so casual, it was classy. He used to call me the gayest straight he's ever known, and I used to call him the straightest gay I've ever known. So, I mean, I realized he was gay right off the bat, just the look in his eyes, and then he'd have dates over. And I mean, it doesn't take much to realize that. I enjoyed it actually up there, and I actually miss Rock a lot.
In the privacy of the castle, Rock, now a confirmed bachelor, surrounds himself with loyal friends and occasional lovers.
Rock Hudson was not lacking for boyfriends. And neither would anybody if they looked like Rock Hudson. I mean, really, you know. He had the money, and he had the cachet, and he had the privacy as a Hollywood star that enabled him to do so. He didn't have to worry that he was going to be fired by the studio because he was gay, because they knew it, and they knew that he was going to be very decorous and keep all of this under wraps.
Rumors abound and eyebrows are raised at the Federal Bureau of Investigation. But even the FBI would lose interest as Rock's love life settles down. By the early 1980s, Rock is discreetly seeing Tom Clark, a movie publicist.
Tom took very good care of Rock. Tom was the authoritative figure that Rock needed in his life. Rock didn't necessarily always want that. He was a sexual creature. Rock liked to stray. Rock liked to do what he wanted when he wanted, but at the same time realized that he needed someone like Tom to give him stability. Rock told me that Tom Clark was his true soulmate.
Tom Clark is a fixture in the Hudson household. That is, until a new love interest appears on the scene. 29-year-old Mark Christian. Martin Flaherty sees that the 57-year-old Rock is immediately attracted to him.
Christian was definitely Rock's type. Rock liked tall, blonde men, surfer-looking men. Christian was a good-looking man.
Brent Beckwith later became Mark Christian's partner for 9 years.
I met him when he was 46, but he was still very good looking. Seeing pictures of him when he was young, he was just drop dead gorgeous. I mean, 6'1", blonde hair, just, the kind of guy that walked into a room and people were just in awe of how good looking he was.
Mark Christian dabbles in music and audio engineering, but does not appear to have a real job. Marty becomes suspicious of his motives.
Christian was the angel. He played the angel, but because Rock was so giddy and smitten with Christian, just for that reason alone, I would never give my 2 cents worth. Love is blind, and the person has to be able to see for themselves. I wish Rock would have seen it a lot sooner.
As the affair becomes serious, Rock's fights with his longtime lover Tom Clark become increasingly bitter. By November 1983, Clark is out and Christian is in.
Tom and Rock were in a little tiff. Tom had moved into the New York apartment for a while. By now, Christian was calling himself the Lady of the Land, and the land being the castle, Rock Hudson's nickname for his home. He was being told to make himself at home, as everybody else at the castle was told. He did. He got too comfortable too quick.
The love affair gets so intense so quickly that Rock considers changing his will.
He made his way in. He insinuated himself in. The beginning of the relationship was basically shopping sprees for Mark Christian. Mark Christian wanted to get into acting, so Mark Christian was given acting lessons by the best coaches. Mark Christian needed a new portfolio, so he was given headshots and full body shots and a new portfolio by the top photographers. He wanted his Mercedes-Benz new car. He wanted new ski outfits. He wanted presents bought for him and his friends. Rock was so giddy and smitten over him that he did it. He just did everything he was asked. Rock was really in love. He thought this was it. He thought that this was the person.
He was very generous, very loving, very Rock Hudson.
Mark's partner later in life, Brent Beckwith, disputes this version of events.
Mark got like $400 a month, kind of putting him on salary so he would have medical benefits, I think is what it was. That's what Mark had told me. But in terms of lavish gifts, no. I mean, Mark said that, actually Rock was not doing that at all.
Mark and Rock have been dating for a year when Rock leaves for Israel to film The Ambassador, his last movie. Christian is now living in the castle full-time. The lovers write each other letters that will later become evidence in a courtroom. But when Rock returns, life at the castle will never be the same again.
He just lost a little bit of weight, but there was no outward signs that he was actually ill. We were at breakfast. I was getting up to get another cup of coffee, and as I was walking around him, I noticed there was a big purple bump on his neck. Because, we always like to keep things light. I said, Rock, have you just been to Asia? And he looked at me in question and he said, why? I said, because it looks like you brought home Mount Everest. What is that thing on your neck?
The sore is diagnosed as Kaposi's sarcoma, a cancer that causes lesions to grow under the skin, and one of the most common symptoms of a new disease afflicting mostly gay men. The disease is called Acquired Immunity Deficiency Syndrome, and in 1984, AIDS is a death sentence.
Suddenly there was this disease. Gay men were getting it, and they were dying. Nobody knew what it was, how it was contracted, and of course there was absolutely no question of any treatment or cure. There was nothing.
Do I think Rock knew he was going to die? Absolutely. Was he a great fighter, a trooper? Absolutely.
Very few people are informed. Rock tells his secretary, Mark Miller, and 2 of his longtime friends. But Tom Clark is not told, nor is Mark Christian, who's been living with Rock for more than 7 months. Secretly, Hudson flies to Paris for experimental treatment with an antiviral medication, HPA23. But Rock's dire prognosis forces him to rethink his estate planning. The current will leaves millions of dollars worth of cars, property, and movie memorabilia to his former lover, Tom Clark.
Tom was in the will for over a decade. Tom was the heir to Rock's estate.
In the new will, Tom Clark is written out. Nobody is sure, but there are rumors that Mark Christian will be the new beneficiary.
Mark Christian, he would probably tell people that he should be named in the will. He was the last lover, and he seemed to have gotten himself in there. He made his way in. He insinuated himself in.
Meanwhile, the antivirals appear to be working, but Rock continues to lose weight, causing concern amongst his friends, especially Mark Christian.
Rock was a very heavy smoker, and Mark's father had just died like in 1983 from lung cancer. And I think that was the main thing on Mark's mind, that Rock could possibly have lung cancer.
The first thought that came to mind with everyone was liver cancer, liver disease, because he drank his whole life, and he drank considerably.
Mark claims that at the time he pressed him about AIDS, but Rock flat out denied he had it.
Mark told me that he basically questioned Rock about it, and Rock said, you know, I've been checked for everything, even the bug, as I think Mark told me was the wording that Rock said for HIV, and said everything came clear. Yeah, he believed him, yeah.
As Rock's health deteriorates, so does the relationship between him and his young lover. Not helped, according to Martin Flaherty, by Christian's conduct in the house.
Christian every day was having different people come over, undesirables. He was staying up for days at a time. They were leaving drugs on the tables. You know, my allegiance lie with Rock, so of course, and plus as the estate manager, I had to tell him what was going on at the house. Christian was aware, I'm sure, that there was going to be a confrontation there. From that point on was when the romance was over.
Still, Rock does not force him to leave. Instead, Mark moves into the room they call the theater room.
Rock hated confrontation. Rock hated confrontation. He abhorred fighting. When Christian moved into the theater, the plan was that if we all just treat him poorly, that he would leave. Well, he didn't leave.
In July 1985, Hudson flies to Paris for another round of antiviral therapy. But he's in no condition to make the trip. Upon arrival at the hotel, he collapses from exhaustion. Local journalists get wind of the story, and finally, Mark Miller, Hudson's assistant, is forced to make a public statement. In Hollywood and beyond, there is shock and sadness, but for one man, the overwhelming emotion is fear.
Oh, I think he was scared to death to find that out.
According to Mark Christian's partner in later years, Christian is crushed by the news from Paris.
He was basically sitting on the couch at Rock's house and watching television when the announcement came from Paris that Rock had AIDS. He found out when everyone else found out, and I think it just shocked him to the core. At that time, unlike now, that was pretty much a death sentence if you got HIV.
Mark Christian has 2 HIV tests during this period. The results are not made known. Meanwhile, the fear of infection is a shadow looming over the Hudson household.
The moment I found out he had AIDS, I was scared for my friend. And then because of the knowledge I had acquired about that disease, I was scared for myself. And of course, I still took every precaution possible because, you know, with blood, coughing, mucus, sweat, you know. When people would come to visit, they would all wear masks and they would stand about 40 feet away and try not to breathe the air, you know.
Rock is starting to fall apart in both mind and body. Those closest to him are managing the house and caring for Rock, most notably Mark Miller, his secretary, and Tom Clark, who returns to be at the side of his former lover. Mark Christian has been sidelined by Rock and his inner circle, but he remains in the house.
I think he had a lot of mixed emotions because at that time, Rock was so sick. Mark asked him, why didn't you tell me? And he told me that Rock basically said that, when something like this happens to you, you're all alone. And I just, I didn't feel I could talk.
Mark Christian, if he would have left the house, would have been kinder. It would have been kinder. We couldn't get him to leave. He was asked to leave. There was no way that we could get him out of the house.
Hudson's failing health brings out the best and the worst in his friends.
When Rock was near the end, people did come around the house, and they actually asked if they were in the will. And when they found out that they weren't, they never came around again. I mean, whatever happened to loving Rock?
Rock's staff are also concerned about their livelihood.
There was a meeting in the living room. At that meeting, Rock announced to everyone and that we would all be taken care of for life. All the people that stayed with him and didn't desert him, we would be taken care of.
Susan Stafford finds the house in a state of disarray.
It was such a circus up there. It was so, people were so scared, fearful.
But amazingly, Rock keeps his sense of humor till the end.
I was sitting there and I was talking to Rock, and I said, what would you change if you could change anything in your life? And he looked at me and he said, I would have always had 2 bathrooms. For some reason, I thought that was hysterically funny for a man that's dying in a bed to have that kind of humor.
The last time I saw Rock Hudson alive was 11 hours before he passed away. He was laying in his bed shaking. He didn't recognize anybody at that point.
On October 2nd, 1985, Rock Hudson dies. He is 59 years old.
When he was passing, I was so grateful he wasn't going to be suffering.
One of his favorite things was to take his own yacht out through the Catalina Channel and out to the islands, the Channel Islands, and take all his friends, even the ones that weren't boat people. He would insist that they went. His wishes were that he was to be cremated immediately and then buried at sea.
Tom Clark scatters Rock's ashes on the water. If Christian was expecting to be named as an heir of Rock's estate, worth an estimated $8 million, he is quickly disappointed. Rock's last will and testament makes no mention of Christian. Instead, the will gives a lifetime income to Rock's secretary, Mark Miller, and his close friend, actor George Nader. But Christian is not planning to just walk away.
I think it was a time of many emotions. Rock had passed away. He lost someone he was close to. He finds out that he's been exposed to HIV, and he's really being basically bullied and trying to be swept under the rug by Mark Miller and his handlers. Mark Miller came up to Mark Christian and basically said, don't go to the press. And if you do, we will slander you. We will say you're a drug addict. We'll say you're a blackmailer. We'll say anything we have to.
Mark Miller asks Mark Christian to take an HIV test. He agrees, and the test comes back negative. But the HIV antibody test is brand new, and its accuracy is unproven. Christian tells them he intends to take legal action against Rock's estate.
We all tried to talk him out of it. We all tried to, because we knew it would ruin Rock's reputation, and it just wouldn't let any healing begin.
I really was so naive in so many ways. Once I was aware of it, it was like, didn't you get this from the get-go, Susan?
Christian files a $10 million claim for damages against the Hudson estate and Mark Miller, alleging a conspiracy to keep the HIV diagnosis a secret. The case triggers a firestorm of debate.
The reaction to the lawsuit was controversial. There was a mixture of, oh, and a certain kind of horror. And a lot of, really? And, well, maybe, and, well, what's the story? Let me read this. People wanted to know. There was a story there. Did Rock Hudson put Mark Christian in danger? What really happened?
I think there was a feeling of it's taboo to potentially, file a case against someone with AIDS or the estate of someone with AIDS. And then the other part was basically the gay community was, it's none of your business, what I do in my private life. I don't have to tell someone that I'm HIV positive.
For the first time, a court will examine the issue of whether a person with AIDS has a legal duty to inform their partners.
The duty to warn your partner was at the heart of the lawsuit, and it was at the heart of the gay community at the time. This was a huge thing.
Mark Christian later claimed he made a serious attempt to come to a financial arrangement with Rock's entourage.
If someone had HIV, the typical life expectancy was 3 years, and the top medical care was about $100,000 a year. So Mark asked to have $300,000 put into a trust that if he developed HIV and AIDS, that money would be available to him. And they basically said, go to hell, is what Mark told me.
Susan Stafford has a different version of events. After Rock's death, Mark Miller, Rock's secretary, authorizes her to make an offer.
We had a meeting, and they asked me if I would talk to Mark Christian and if I would talk to him about accepting a certain amount of money each month for the rest of his life in order to keep Rock out of being dragged through courts. I started at $50,000 a month. But it wouldn't have made any difference what, and that's what I'm trying to say. It wouldn't have made any difference what I had offered. He wasn't there to negotiate. He didn't want the money. Mark Christian wanted to become a celebrity. Well, my mother always taught me never to say anything bad about somebody if you can't say something good. So having said that, I don't really appreciate crooks and people who lie and cheat. I'm not one of those, a rat is a rat is a rat. What can I say?
If Christian wins, Rock's insurance company is on the hook for millions of dollars. They hire Robert Parker Mills to defend the lawsuit.
I had a basic Missouri upbringing that, you always tell the truth and you always do the morally right thing. I came out to California and I realized right away that the morality was a lot different out here. No matter what's the right thing to do, you win at all cost. And I didn't like the idea of filing a lawsuit when your defendant is dead and can't defend himself. Tactically, it was a good idea. Ethically, I thought it was a bad idea. There had to be better ways to resolve this case. But Mark Christian didn't want to ever settle the case. He was hell-bent on getting publicity through trial and destroying the reputation of the person he claimed he loved so much.
Depositions have already been taken from some key witnesses, including Mark Miller, Rock's secretary. Mills comes across a surprising admission.
The thing that concerned me the most was Mark Miller was allowed to testify that Rock Hudson told him not to tell Mark Christian that he'd been diagnosed with AIDS. He testified openly that Rock told him not to tell, quote, the kid.
Will Miller's testimony prove that there was a conspiracy of silence in the Hudson household?
We were all asked at the estate to not say anything.
Or will the defense manage to cast doubt on Christian's character?
What he was claiming was totally inconsistent with the facts.
In the fall of 1988, a sensational trial begins at the Los Angeles Superior Court. Mark Christian versus the estate of Rock Hudson. Rock's former lover alleges that Hudson put his life in danger by keeping his AIDS diagnosis a secret. Martin Flaherty, the estate manager, says he received orders to keep Christian in the dark, but for good reason.
We were all asked at the estate to not say anything, but as far as keeping the information from Mark Christian, you know, that would be like saying, well, I'll keep the information. Let's not tell John Doe down the street. I mean, why do they need to know? Mark didn't really even need to know for any reason because he wasn't having active sexual relations with Rock.
And that's the crucial point that the estate needs to prove, that the relationship was over by the time Rock was diagnosed with AIDS. The estate hires 25-year-old Paul Cohen, a Los Angeles private investigator.
The question was Mark Christian, the plaintiff, telling the truth about his relationship and the number of sexual contacts he had with Rock Hudson? And what he was claiming was totally inconsistent with the facts.
Mark Christian claims that before moving into the castle, he and Hudson had numerous romantic encounters at LA motels. Cohen begins to put those claims to the test.
He alleged that Rock Hudson came in, paid the room with an American Express card issued in the name of Mammoth Films, which was Rock Hudson's company. And I went through those records looking for any hotel bills or any receipts from any hotels. I found literally none. I checked virtually 60 hotels throughout Southern California, from North Hollywood all the way to Santa Barbara, and none of the hotels that were mentioned ever proved.
As the trial gets underway, Mills puts Christian on the stand and asks him to explain.
He testified under oath that he'd had a sexual relationship with Rock Hudson 3 to 5 times a week. And so I first of all asked him, well, where did you have sex outside of the house? And he was caught off guard, and he says, motels. And I go, where? What motels? He goes, well, motels up on Sunset Boulevard. And I go, well, name me any of the motels where you had sex with Rock Hudson in. And his answer was, I don't recall.
Mills aims to cast doubts on Christian's character and his loyalty to Rock. They start to unearth some startling allegations. Rock's 80-year-old gardener takes the stand. He testifies that he inadvertently walked in on Mark Christian and another man.
He came in and he saw a gentleman kneeling down in front of the plaintiff. He did not see the sexual act, but he saw the people in the position that they were in. He immediately excused himself and left.
I thought that nobody would not believe an 80-year-old gardener, Japanese gardener.
A number of individuals, specifically James Wright, who was the butler, had noticed that 2 men entered the room. 1 bed was used overnight, and the room was left in a condition where he found the sheets were soiled.
Accusations continue to be leveled at Mark Christian.
He was not monogamous in any sense of the word. Everyone was a challenge. Mark Christian was a male prostitute. Everyone knew it. He told everyone.
It's just inflammatory. It's not in his character, and I think basically it comes down to a legal strategy, and their legal strategy was to discount Mark in any way they could, and if you slander somebody, they feel that that's going to help their case.
Harold Roden has to rebuild his client's soiled reputation. His son Paul remembers that he relished the challenge.
He was a wonderful litigator in the courtroom because he was uncompromising in what he knew and what he believed to be true and right. Jurors and juries loved him. He was known more than anything around LA as a great trial lawyer.
He was very, very aggressive and was known as a bulldog. If he put on a witness that was adverse to his position, he would rip into that witness.
Susan Stafford is put on the stand, and Roden does not hold back, calling her a prostitute and an exhibitionist.
They had to demean me in order to discredit me, in order to build the case for Mark Christian. And so the bullets started coming. And the questions, I was in shock.
He would say, when they get on the stand, when I get them on the stand, he would say, when he had people reeling, when he had them sweating, when he was pointing his finger and catching them in a lie, that sort of thing, he lived for those moments.
Roden has to demonstrate that the relationship between Mark and Rock was lasting and genuine. One piece of evidence has a particular impact on the jury: the love letters, written early on in their relationship while Rock was in Israel.
The language is just so, it's lovely. You can't even tell when you hear the letters that it's a man writing to another man. It could be a woman to her boyfriend, a soldier writing to his girlfriend. It could be anybody. Love is love, He says, "Hi, babe. I went to the window and looked at the sun setting and thinking of how you would be feeling all of the day to come and thinking about the sun coming up on you, and then I shed a tear or two. Would you by any chance be looking at the sunrise? I love you so much, baby. The countdown is now 20 more days to go and they are dragging like you can't believe. I love you, I love you, I love you." And when he read them for the jury, they were able to hear this was not manipulation, this was not lies. These are the most beautiful love letters anyone could want to receive.
I always thought that these were just kept for blackmailing purposes.
Christian claims that after the AIDS diagnosis, he and Rock were still having regular sex. But witnesses at the house claim the relationship was finished long before.
So they stopped having sex before Rock went to Tel Aviv. Of course, I wasn't in the bedroom all the time, but you can just tell, just like your best friend and just like your siblings.
Rock didn't speak to him, didn't say hi, didn't ask him anything, and basically he was non-existent.
The estate claims that Christian only got to stay in the house through the use of blackmail.
He was asked to leave again and again. And that was when the big threats came out, that if I have to leave this house, I'm going to go to the world and tell the world that Rock Hudson's a fairy. I'm going to tell the world Rock Hudson's gay. And so all the threats and the extortion and everything started coming out.
Brent Beckwith believes there were attempts by the estate to suppress evidence of how close Rock and Mark really were.
There was a birthday party that Rock gave Mark, and they basically tried to say that it never happened, and that it's a complete fabrication. But there was a picture that basically showed the party with a cake with Rock and a birthday cake with Mark. Kind of showed the extent of their misrepresentations.
But Mark Christian's lawyer, Harold Roden, found his client to be truthful, a solid witness, and a likable guy.
In spite of himself, he found himself very drawn to Mark Christian. Mark Christian changed my father's attitudes about gay people. So here he was spending a great deal of time with this gay man and would come home and talk about how charmed he was by him, how impressed he was.
Paul Roden would later meet Mark for himself.
He was the most genuine type of person, kind, sincere, gentle man. The other thing that was striking was his great love and affection for Rock Hudson. He loved that man. Their relationship was a true love affair.
Meanwhile, there's a vital question of fact that might turn the jury against Mark Christian.
It would be a statistical impossibility for him not to have contracted the virus.
And a work of fiction that casts further doubt on his story.
It was a roadmap of the case against the estate of Rock Hudson.
Christian and his lawyer, Harold Roden, charm the press and expertly spin the story.
The bottom line is the press takes an angle, and that's what they follow, and their angle was David versus Goliath. Rich, wealthy movie star takes advantage of quote, poor, innocent 35-year-old man. The media took Mark Christian's word from day one.
He portrayed himself very well. He always was well-dressed, well-mannered, and put the best foot forward to the press, which he did on numerous occasions. He liked the camera.
Mark Christian needs to prove he is in fear for his life, but he has a problem. If he and Rock were having sex for months after the AIDS diagnosis, why did he not contract the virus?
You can prove it statistically. If an individual is infected with the virus, and if he had sex with Rock Hudson over 150 times, the experts, the medical experts, indicated and testified to that it would be a statistical impossibility for him not to have contracted the virus.
And we ran 35 different tests. He's the most tested man that I'm aware of in the world.
Mills insists that Mark Christian's actions show he is not a man in fear of his life. After hearing the news report from Paris, Christian claims to have visited a doctor to ask about AIDS.
We got the name of the doctor, and I went to visit the doctor. The doctor turned out to be a chiropractor, and the records showed that he came to visit to determine how he could bulk up for a weightlifting class that he was taking. There was absolutely no mention of any fear of contracting the AIDS virus.
In court, Mark Christian maintains he is still at risk.
So at that time, even though he tested negative, we really didn't know scientifically what the incubation was. It was good news, but it was also a feeling of, well, what about the future?
One of the things that he was trying to prove that he was in such fear of contracting the AIDS virus, and he was also in fear of disseminating that virus if he had a sexual partner with anybody else. That's why it became so important to find individuals who had been intimate with Mr. Christian during the window of time that he claimed that he was celibate. I found 5 individuals. 4 of them admitted to having sex with the plaintiff during the window in time in which the plaintiff said he was celibate.
Christian's lawyer, Harold Roden, ducks these body blows and distills his message into a simple, persuasive legal argument.
He told how he was sitting in his den, listening to Madame Butterfly and thinking about the case with his legal pad and having had one too many brandies. And sitting up there in his room at his chair, and the words just came to him. The duty to warn. And when he got that idea, the duty to warn, that was it opened for him. And that became his fight, that became his cause, and that became the point of law that he wanted to drill home.
And at a time when AIDS was new, terrifying, and mysterious, his message struck a chord.
The jury reacted really well to Mark. They reacted really well to my father. He was having a ball in the courtroom every day from opening argument. I think he knew this was his case. He controlled it. He ran the show. The other lawyers reacted to what he did.
Finally, the verdict comes in. At first, it seems like a victory for Mills and the estate.
The damages he read, he indicated was $1,450. And I go, well, that sounds great to me, you know, I can accept that. Then the foreman of the jury gets up and says, Your Honor, we made a mistake.
The actual award is $14.5 million for compensatory damages. They award an extra $7.5 million in so-called punitive damages. The total is a staggering $22 million.
It just didn't compute. It was so crazy how much more than he'd even asked for.
I was in a state of shock. I could not believe that all this had occurred in this trial.
It seemed to me that the judge was rendering a verdict on the gay community that had AIDS. And Rock Hudson was the symbolic villain, as it were.
It is a really landmark case. It is very, very important. You have to tell your partner of your status.
Mills tries a last-ditch effort to overturn the verdict. He succeeds in reducing the award to $5.5 million. In June 1989, Harold Roden dies in a plane crash. The two sides, minus Roden, reach a settlement for an undisclosed sum. And in the end, Rock Hudson's last wishes are still carried out. Rock's friends, George Nader and Mark Miller, are provided for until the end of their lives. After the trial, private investigator Paul Cohen makes a fascinating discovery. Mark Christian and a friend, Liberty Martin, had been working on a movie script.
They created a script that was rumored to be in existence. I located that script and obtained a copy of it. The script was named Between a Rock and a Hard Place. The script was a story of an individual, a man who had a gay affair with a celebrity and later decided that he was going to blackmail that celebrity. It was a roadmap of the case against the estate of Rock Hudson.
But the judge does not allow the script to affect the final judgment.
It was never admitted into evidence. The judge denied the admission of it. We did not agree with the ruling, but it was the ruling.
On June 2, 2009, Mark Christian dies of pulmonary problems related to smoking. He never develops HIV or AIDS, and friends say he spoke fondly of Rock until the end.
He didn't stick around Hollywood. He didn't go on and capitalize on that trial. I think he agreed with the jury's verdict, thought it was right, but beyond that, I think he didn't want to become famous for that.
I get so many people that say, how could Rock have done that to that kid? How could Rock have, you know, and I sit there in amazement and look at them and say, are you kidding me? You know, and I want to explain to everybody that that's not the way it was.
Despite the tangled web of Hudson's life and loves, his image, gentle giant, loyal friend, and Hollywood legend remains intact.
He made so many people happy, had so many good films in his life, and let alone he was such a good person. That's what he should be remembered by, not by the stigma that this lawsuit caused. That's not how Rock Hudson should be remembered.